Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bookercast, the podcast where books come to life.
And I'm so excited to dive into another amazing story with all of you.
Whether you're a bookworm or just love a good story, this is the place for you.
Every episode, we explore incredible books, talk about their stories and characters, and share insights that'll make you fall in love with reading all over again.
All right, let's not keep you waiting any longer. Get comfortable, and let's jump right into it.
Sounds good.
All right, so today we're going to really get into R.F. Kuang's Yellowface. It's a novel that's making some serious waves in contemporary literature, and we're going to be dissecting excerpts from the book itself to figure out why it's causing all this buzz. And trust me, this is a story that will stick with you. We're talking ambition, jealousy, cultural appropriation, the dark side of the publishing industry. It's a wild ride, so buckle up.
You know, one of the things that I find so fascinating about Yellowface is how it's a story about a writer writing a story. This kind of layered approach allows Kuang to critique the publishing industry almost from the inside out.
Yeah, it's like she's holding up a mirror to the whole literary world, right?
Yeah.
And one thing that she really dives into is this idea that bestsellers are kind of chosen by the industry, not necessarily just based on pure merit.
Exactly. The book really dissects this machinery of how publishing houses decide which books to champion. And it suggests that, marketing, image, who you know, all of that can sometimes overshadow the quality of the writing itself.
So it's not just about talent.
It's a really complex equation, and Kuang explores this through this stark contrast between our protagonist, June Hayward, who is a struggling white author, and her deceased friend, Athena Liu, a wildly successful Chinese-American author.
Okay, so we've got Jin striving for recognition, and then we have Athena, who's achieved everything that June wants. And then tragedy strikes, right? Athena dies, leaving behind an unfinished manuscript.
And this is where Jin makes a choice that kind of sets the whole story in motion. She finishes Athena's manuscript, making edits that she believes will elevate the work. But then she takes it a step further. She passes it off as her own work, taking on the identity of this deceased author to finally achieve the success that she's always craved.
Wow, talk about a moral gray area, right? I mean, it really makes you wonder what would push someone to such an extreme.
Well, June's actions are definitely stemming from this deep-seated jealousy, this ambition. She sees Athena's success as a reflection of her own failures. And in this moment of desperation, she decides to claim that success for herself.
But of course, an act like that has consequences.
Right. June experiences the kind of literary stardom she's always desired, but at a very heavy price. People begin to question her authenticity. Accusations of plagiarism surface, forcing her to confront the weight of her choices. And this is where the themes of cultural appropriation really come into sharp focus.
Because it's not just that she's taking credit for Athena's words. She's also appropriating elements of Chinese culture within the manuscript itself, right?
Precisely. She renames characters to sound more, quote, authentic. She cuts out what she considers unnecessary backstory, and she even tries to justify her actions as some form of reparation for Athena supposedly stealing from her in the past, but it all rings pretty hollow.
It begs the question, can you ever truly justify profiting from another culture's stories? And even more broadly, where's the line between inspiration and just outright theft?
These are some of those really thorny ethical dilemmas that Yellowface grapples with. And you know what? Kuang doesn't offer any easy answers. She leaves the reader wrestling with these uncomfortable truths about authorship, cultural ownership, and the price of success.
It definitely makes you stop and think about how we consume stories and who benefits from those stories. But there's another layer to this too, right? This whole manipulation of June's own identity to gain an edge in the publishing world. She publishes under her middle name Song to capitalize on its ambiguity and appeal to a wider audience.
That's such a crucial point because it highlights the systemic issues of privilege and representation in the industry. June, as a white woman, is able to kind of leverage her identity in a way that a writer from a more marginalized background might not be able to. And it makes you wonder how much her race contributes to her success, both with the stolen manuscript and with her own initial failures.
So we're already seeing how Yellowface goes beyond a simple tale of literary theft. It's a commentary on the complexities of race, identity, and even the nature of storytelling itself.
Absolutely. And as we kind of delve deeper into the text, we're going to see how Kuang uses June's unreliable narration and the satirical tone to further expose this hypocrisy and moral ambiguity of the publishing world and, by extension, society at large.
This is where things get really interesting, and we'll pick it up right here in part 2 of our deep dive into Yellowface.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Yellowface. We left off talking about how Kuang uses June's unreliable narration to really make us question, everything we're reading.
Right. It's like she's constantly playing with our expectations,
Yeah.
forcing us to examine our own biases as we try to figure out, like, what's real and what's just a product of June's kind of warped perspective.
And this is where I think the book's satirical edge really shines. Kuang doesn't hold back in her portrayal of the publishing industry and their obsession with image and marketability.
Oh, absolutely. You can practically feel that cringing awkwardness of those industry parties, those book launches that June describes, the way she obsesses over her author photo, her social media presence. It's both hilarious and unsettling at the same time.
It speaks to this idea that authorship has become a kind of performance, right? Where the author's persona is almost more important than the actual words on the page.
And June really buys into this whole thing wholeheartedly. It's like she's trying to craft this perfect image of a successful writer, even if it means sacrificing her integrity along the way.
Which brings us back to June's deep-seated jealousy of Athena. In these excerpts, we see how June is constantly comparing herself to Athena, finding herself lacking in every way.
It's almost like painful to read those passages where June dissects Athena's success and it attributes it to everything from her exotic looks to her tragic backstory. You can really sense that resentment bubbling beneath the surface.
Yeah, and it's this resentment coupled with her ambition that ultimately drives June to steal Athena's manuscript. It's not just about wanting the fame and recognition, it's about proving herself superior to the friend she secretly envied.
And to make things even more complicated, June tries to justify her plagiarism by claiming that Athena actually stole from her first. She accuses Athena of using details from a traumatic experience that June shared with her in college. For a short story that Athena published.
This is where I think Kuang so masterfully blurs the lines between victim and perpetrator. It forces us to consider maybe inspiration isn't always as pure as we'd like to think. And it makes us question, like, how much ownership do we really have over our own experiences? Especially when those experiences become fodder for someone else's creative work.
Right, and it highlights how easily narratives can be manipulated,
Yeah.
how the same story can be told from these drastically different perspectives, each claiming to be the, quote, true version of events.
Exactly, and that unreliable narration keeps us constantly on edge. We're never quite sure if we should trust June's interpretation of events, especially when it comes to her relationship with Athena. We're left to kind of piece together the truth from these fragments and conflicting accounts.
And then just when you think June has gotten away with it all, the internet comes crashing down on her. Her true identity as the author of The Last Front is revealed, and she becomes the target of this intense online scrutiny and harassment.
The book really doesn't shy away from depicting the just viciousness of these online mobs. Kuang captures that relentlessness of the hate comments and the way social media can just amplify negativity in such a terrifying way.
I found those passages where June describes endlessly scrolling through these hateful tweets and messages incredibly disturbing, really. It highlights the toxic nature of online culture and the toll it takes on a person's mental well-being.
And it speaks to this larger societal issue of how quickly we are to judge and condemn others in the digital age. It's like social media has given everyone this platform to express their outrage, but without any accountability or consideration for the consequences.
And it's interesting how Kuang also uses this online backlash to expose the hypocrisy within the publishing industry itself. Because June, despite being exposed as a plagiarist, still manages to maintain a certain level of success.
Right, she gets a movie deal, continues to give interviews, and is even seen as like a somewhat sympathetic figure by some.
It makes you wonder if a writer from a marginalized background had done the same thing. Would they have been given that same leniency? Would they have been able to bounce back from a scandal like that?
It's a question that Kuang leaves kind of lingering in the air, and it points to the systemic inequalities that continue to plague the publishing world. The fact that June, as a white woman, is able to profit from her deception, while writers of color often struggle to even get their voices heard, is a stark indictment of the industry's biases.
So as we continue to unpack Yellowface, we're seeing how it goes way beyond a simple story about plagiarism. It's really a commentary on the very fabric of our society, how we value certain stories over others, how we consume and disseminate information, and how power and privilege play such a huge role in shaping our perceptions of truth and authenticity. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Yellowface. We've really been unpacking the layers of this novel, from the cutthroat publishing world to the moral complexities of June's actions. But things take a truly unsettling turn towards the end, right?
Yeah, toward the end, there's definitely a shift in tone. These mysterious Instagram posts start appearing seemingly from Athena's account, These really cryptic messages and images, they start to feel like almost like a ghost reaching out from beyond the grave.
Right. It's like a whole psychological thriller is unfolding within the story,
Mm.
and June gets completely fixated on these posts, convinced that Athena is somehow still alive
Mm.
and that she's orchestrating her downfall.
Oh, yeah. We see her spiraling into this paranoia, guilt, questioning her own sanity as she tries to make sense of these messages.
And this all leads to that incredibly tense confrontation at the Exorcist steps in Georgetown. June is absolutely convinced she's going to find Athena there, ready for this final showdown.
But instead, she finds Candace Lee, the former editorial assistant, who's always been suspicious of June's book.
It's such a brilliant twist. It flips the script entirely. We realize that Candace has actually been the one behind those haunting Instagram posts all along, using them to expose June and reclaim Athena's legacy.
And Candace's actions, while morally ambiguous, really highlight that deep-seated anger and resentment that she feels, not just toward June, but toward the publishing industry itself, that she feels has silenced and exploited writers like her.
She becomes kind of a vigilante, taking matters into her own hands to seek out a form of justice that the system has denied her.
Right, and it brings us back to those central questions that Yellowface is raising. Who has the right to tell certain stories? Who profits from those stories? And what happens when those narratives are stolen and manipulated for personal gain?
And even though Candace succeeds in exposing June, the ending of Yellowface is far from a neat resolution. You're left with this uneasy feeling that true justice hasn't really been served.
Yeah, June, despite the scandal, still benefits from her deception. She gets this lucrative movie deal. She maintains a certain level of public sympathy. It suggests that the systems of power and privilege that allowed her to succeed in the first place, they remain largely intact.
It's kind of a sobering reminder that exposing wrongdoing doesn't always lead to meaningful change. And it leaves us, the readers, grappling with the complexities of the situation without offering any easy answers.
I think that's what's so powerful about Yellowface. It doesn't present this clear-cut case of good versus evil. It challenges us to confront the nuances of cultural appropriation, the murky ethics of the publishing world, and the ways that our own biases shape our understanding of these issues.
It's a book that really stays with you long after you finish reading it. It makes you question the stories you consume and the systems that shape those stories.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think that's what makes Yellowface such an important and timely work of contemporary literature.
It holds up this mirror to our society, forces us to examine our own complicity in the systems of power and privilege that perpetuate inequality. And it challenges us to really think critically about the stories we tell and the impact those stories have on the world around us.
Yeah, and as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought. Yellowface is so much more than just a captivating story. It's a conversation starter. It invites us to engage in these difficult dialogues about race, representation, and the responsibilities that we have as both creators and consumers of culture. So what resonated most with you? And what questions does this book leave you pondering?
And that's a wrap for today's episode of BookerCast. We hope you enjoyed diving into it as much as we did. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to hear your thoughts on this episode.
Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this episode with your fellow book lovers. And let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. See you in the next deep dive. Bye for now, and happy reading.